Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's lovely to be with you here. My name is Silja Bára Ómarsdóttir. I'm rector of the University of Iceland, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this event. It's wonderful to see so many GRÓ GEST fellows and alumni, as well as staff, partners, gathered here in the ceremonial hall to celebrate the successes of the program and to reflect on how we can move going forward. The GRÓ Center for Capacity Development, Sustainability and Societal Change, the GRÓ Gender Equality Studies and Training Program, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Iceland, in collaboration with the Institute of International Affairs, have organized this event. The university has been a proud partner of GRÓ GEST since its inception in 2009, when it started as an experimental academic program and has now developed into an institution in its own right with international recognition. The program has enriched the academic life at the university by forging links with international partners, with the participation of internationally renowned scholars. It has also cooperated actively with international development partners and various governmental, international and civil society organizations. The responsibility to maintain a network of this scope and breadth rests on the program staff, local and international contributors, those who nominate fellows in partner countries, and many others who support them in their organizations implementing their projects when they return home, whether those are ministries, NGOs, universities, or other organizations. And of course, we should not forget the contribution of the fellows who themselves make up a huge part of our network. GRÓ GEST is hosted at the School of Humanities at the University of Iceland, but it is a very interdisciplinary program, a site of educational experience where diverse academic and cultural perspectives intersect. The contributing academics sit in various departments representing all 5 schools at the University of Iceland: humanities, social sciences, health sciences, education, engineering, and natural sciences. GRÓ GEST has actively encouraged interdisciplinary collaboration by developing specialized modules that focus on, for example, gender in the labor market, gender in health, gender in education, gender and the environment, to name some examples. The program also draws on the expertise of local and international scholars and practitioners from other universities, research institutions, civil society organizations, and international agencies, whose contributions enrich the program with interdisciplinary perspectives, grounded knowledge, and, of course, practical experience. An important goal of the program is to find ways through education and research to transcend borders, real and symbolic, to promote collaboration and transcultural understanding on individual and collective rights. One example is the importance of women's participation in peace building and reconciliation, but also the need to protect human rights, prevent conflict and violence, and ensure that peace processes address the structural inequalities that sustain injustice. And I don't need to tell you that we live in precarious times, with a new war having started just this weekend, but many conflicts are also ongoing in the world, whether we look to Palestine, Ukraine, or Sudan. The core of the GRÓ GEST program focuses on understanding the effects of conflict and supporting efforts to build peace. And with this in mind, I want to express my gratitude to the GRÓ GEST program for marking here at the University of Iceland the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine with the exhibition Unissued Diplomas, Never Graduated, Eternally Honored. This moving project honors Ukrainian students whose lives were cut short by the war in Ukraine. And I want to especially recognize Darina Zahorodnia, who is a GRÓ GEST 2026 fellow, and one of the initiators of this global initiative. So thank you, Darina, for bringing this exhibition to the university. And I also want to extend my appreciation to the other 23 members of the current GRÓ GEST cohort for their solidarity and active participation in this project. As the exhibit demonstrates, the GRÓ GEST program is not just an educational platform, but a program that encourages and engages in open inquiry and investigation. In a time when we see authoritarian forces growing in so many countries, seeking to reverse emancipatory social changes and to censor claims of justice, the importance of such venues of higher education cannot be overstated. GEST has made both vision and action central to its study and training program. This fits really well with the emphasis of the University of Iceland on global learning, and GEST has built a diverse team of instructors who represent, as I've stated, broad fields of knowledge and expertise, both from the global north and the global south. At the same time, gender equality remains a core value of the GEST program, but it has expanded from its beginning, focusing on a more binary approach to gender, to a more intersectional reach, but focusing on issues related to disability, race, class, and LGBTQI+, for example. Before closing, I want to take the opportunity to all of those who have contributed to the GRÓ GEST program, its dedicated staff, now including Irma, Gitti, Guðrún, Thomas, Svanhildur, Sarah Margaret, and Margaret Ann, have, over the years, not only ensured that the program itself runs smoothly, but they've brought creativity and care and an unwavering commitment to supporting every fellow and participant. They've been incredibly creative. The swimming lessons that were included, at least in the beginning, are a great way of showing how very simple acts can be emancipatory and strengthen the confidence and skills of the fellows. And the welcoming attitude, I think, has also made just a huge difference in people's lives. I also want to acknowledge the Icelandic Ministry for Foreign Affairs and the GRÓ Center for their steadfast support, alongside the many local and international partners whose contributions have been vital to the program's success. Together, your efforts make the GRÓ GEST program truly an inspiring community of learning, collaboration, and impact. And finally, dear GRÓ GEST fellows, current fellows, and members of the alumni, whether you're in the hall here or online, as students and advocates for gender equality, the expertise that you acquire here is not the only thing that you take back. You leave behind a university community that is affected by your insights, by your dedication, and your courage. Each of you has brought a unique perspective that inspires and reminds us why the pursuit of excellence, knowledge, and justice matters here just as much as in your home countries. So I want to thank you for being here, for your commitment, and for the energy that you bring to this university. You make our community stronger, and the world will be brighter because of the work that you do. So thank you very much. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Þorgerður Katrín Gunnarsdóttir, was unfortunately unable to be with us here today. She is taking off on a flight just within the next few minutes. But she sends her regrets and wishes that she could be here in person. But in her place, please join me in welcoming Permanent Secretary of State at the MFA, Martin Eyjolfsson, to give a short address. And after his comments, Dr. Irma Erlingsdóttir of GRÓ GEST will take over as moderator for the remainder of the meeting. I look forward to hearing all your contributions today, and welcome, Martin.
Okay. Rector of University of Iceland, Silja Bára Ómarsdóttir, Excellencies and dear friends, I don't know about whether my speech will be short, Silja Bára, but let us try. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the third event in our series From Knowledge to Development Impact, where we highlight the achievements of the 4 GRÓ training programs on geothermal energy, fisheries, land restoration, and today gender equality. As Silja Bára said, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is on her way to Poland any minute, and she sends her best regards. She is herself a gender pioneer. She is the longest serving member of the parliament. Sometimes I pull her leg and say she is the oldest one, and she's not happy. She stresses I'm the longest serving one, not the oldest one. And she is serving in a government with 3 women leaders. That is also a setup that we see for the first time in the history of our republic. So she is very much with us here in spirit today, and was very interested in hearing about your stories and your impact in your home countries. In the previous events in this series, we have explored how Iceland's long-standing emphasis on knowledge sharing in development cooperation has supported partner countries in harnessing geothermal energy and strengthening the sustainable fisheries. And now we turn to a structural foundation of sustainable development itself, gender equality. Advancing gender equality and women's empowerment is a cornerstone of, well, not only the Icelandic foreign policy, but the government policy overall, and promoting equal rights and opportunities for all, regardless of gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, or other aspects of identity, is a top priority. And simply, it doesn't actually make any sense. You can say it doesn't matter what, how noble you think gender equality is. If you're only thinking about debit and credit and public finances or private power, it doesn't make any sense at all to leave half the population out. You have to include everybody. So no matter what you might think of gender equality, it simply doesn't make sense to be against it. That is just a basic fact of life, almost, not almost, it is. And as the title of today's event reminds us, gender equality is under pressure. Progress cannot be taken for granted. In many parts of the world, we are witnessing setbacks and growing resistance to hard-won rights. At a time of rising instability and polarization, advancing gender equality is more urgent than ever. We must stand united and place equality at the center of our efforts to build just, peaceful and sustainable societies. I can assure you that the Icelandic government is doing everything in its power to stop the backlash and get us back on the right track when it comes to our commitment to gender equality. And these are commitments, let's not forget about that. These are commitments that almost all UN members have signed up to. And we use our voice and we use our vote, and we work tirelessly within the organization that I mentioned, not least now, the Human Rights Council, where we sit for the next 2 years, and have already sat since the beginning of last year. Ladies and gentlemen, this commitment is equally central to our development cooperation and lies at the very heart of the GRÓ Gender Equality Studies and Training Programme. Gender equality drives democratic governance, economic resilience, peace and social stability. GRÓ GEST is the youngest of the GRÓ Training Programmes, established in 2009, as Silja Bára mentioned, and if I'm not, I know I'm right actually, that the pioneer or the Minister for Foreign Affairs that's basically worked for the setup of the program is Ingibjörg Sólrún Gísladóttir, who was a gender pioneer. One of the real pioneers herself back in the 70s and 80s. And she was the second foreign minister in the history of the Republic. And this actually has been working very well, and we are very grateful for our cooperation with the university. And nearly 300 gender equality professionals have since come to Iceland to strengthen their knowledge and leadership. While most develop projects for direct implementation, others focus on research that supports and informs practical project development. Today we will hear from GRÓ GEST alumni who have traveled from Africa and Asia to share how they use the tools and expertise gained here in Iceland in order to drive a real and lasting change back home. And let me share a few examples, not those who will be mentioned here today, but others. While studying at GRÓ GEST, a fellow from Malawi identified child marriage as a key factor behind girls' school dropout rates. After returning home, he helped lead advocacy for efforts that contribute to the 2017 constitutional amendment, raising the legal age of marriage up to 18, strengthening the protection for girls nationwide. And I found especially noteworthy that it was a he and not a she that drove these changes or helped in that respect. A fellow from Ukraine researched sexual violence as a weapon of war in Russia's aggression against Ukraine, examining these horrific war crimes and identified legal mechanisms for holding those responsible accountable. A GRÓ GEST alumni from Uganda has supported parliamentary reviews to ensure gender equality that is reflected in national legislation on education and social inclusion. In Sri Lanka, an alumni has worked with judicial actors to develop gender-sensitive tools for handling sexual and gender-based violence cases, strengthening fairness and institutional integrity in the justice sector. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, a GRÓ GEST alumna contributed to establish the country's first safe house for LGBT persons. So these are only a few stories that, or examples of stories that we will hear more of now, and I'm looking forward to, and I'm not gonna dwell longer. I would just like to thank the University of Iceland and the dedicated staff members of and partners of the GRÓ GEST program. And we have been in this cooperation for over 17 years, and we are still advancing and progressing. And to you, past and present, I would just like to thank you for your courage, leadership, and determination. We are incredibly proud to be part of your journey, to be agents of change in your home. And I would also like to address the males in this audience, because, you know, gender equality doesn't happen without our participation. And to bring men and boys into the debate, it just you know, redoubles our efforts. Thank you very much.
So distinguished guests, colleagues, partners and friends, my name is Irma Ellingsdóttir and I'm the director of the GRÓ GEST program here at the University of Iceland. It is truly encouraging to see such strong participation from our fellows and alumni, both here and online, as we come together to consider the program's achievements and its future path. I would like to say a few words about our goals and the challenges we face in a time of geopolitical rupture and danger. We meet at a time when gender equality is increasingly contested. Across regions, we are witnessing political retrogression, attacks against human rights, shrinking civic space, renewed restrictions on women's rights, and hostility towards LGBTQI+ communities. As part of an authoritarian backlash, narratives fueled by polarization and divisions portray gender equality as external, imposed, or culturally alien. In this context, the question for institutions such as ours is not only whether gender equality matters, it is whether we are prepared to defend it, resist its dismantling, and restore its transformative power. The GRÓ GEST program is under the auspices of the University of Iceland in close collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and within the broader GRÓ Center framework. We invite mid-career professionals for advanced studies in international gender equality and extend our collaboration beyond the 5-month program through project support, partnerships, and knowledge exchanges in their home countries. This positionality carries power, and with it, responsibility. The central concern for us has been how we relate and engage in learning practices. GRÓ GEST is not premised on exporting equality models, whether Nordic or non-Nordic ones. Our fellows arrive as experienced professionals, public servants, civil society leaders, scholars, and practitioners. They bring institutional knowledge, societal insight, and lived experiences from complex and often contested political settings. The program is designed as a space of transcultural exchange. Knowledge is co-produced rather than transmitted. At its core, gender justice is about how societies organize power. Educational spaces matter because they determine whether existing hierarchies are treated as given or as open to changes. Our ambition is to support independent critical thinking with students defining priorities in dialogue with their own communities. The philosophy of the GRÓ GEST program does not end when fellows leave Iceland. Our alumni strategy for 2026 to 2030 is built on the understanding that alumni are long-time partners. Their network is alumni-led and supported by the program. It is a space for peer solidarity, professional collaboration, and locally grounded initiatives. In practical terms, this means introducing mechanisms such as the March 8 Fund, which provides small-scale seed support to alumni-led projects carried out in local, state, and regional contexts. Backing country chapters, meetings, and online seminars allow alumni to sustain feminist peer communities in environments where such work can be politically risky or institutionally constrained. In 2026, for example, we will facilitate a launch event in Malawi for our massive open online course, Ending Violence, International Human Rights Frameworks, followed by an alumni conference in Uganda, co-hosted and co-organized with our longtime partner, the Institute of Gender and Development at the University of Makerere. Under the theme, Epistemic Justice in Practice, Co-creating Contextualized Solutions in Global North-South Development Partnerships. The call for papers will be issued soon. These themes are defined and led by our alumni, reflecting their experience, scholarship, and commitment to shaping context-sensitive development partnerships. Another example of this approach is our alumni-led blended learning model. It builds directly on the GRÓ GEST online courses, which are based on gender theory, intersectional analysis, and practical tools for change. Alumni adapt this content into locally delivered training programs in their home countries. They become facilitators, conveners, and recognized experts within their own institutions and professional communities. The model reduces reliance on external consultants, while strengthening local ownership and institutional continuity. Additionally, through our PhD initiative and broader research collaboration projects, we support candidates from the Global South in becoming internationally recognized knowledge producers. This forms part of a broader commitment to epistemic justice, reshaping gender scholarship by challenging hierarchical divisions between theory and implementation, and recognizing that critical knowledge is produced across diverse contexts, not only in traditional academic institutional settings. None of this alters the reality of bachelors or guarantees success, but it reflects an orientation, a disposition, and determination. What defines GRÓ GEST is not only its outcomes, important as they are, it is also the ethical stance from which we operate, a commitment to partnership over patronage, co-production over one-dimensional transfer, and long-term thinking over short-term intervention. It recognizes that gender justice is not external to societal and political orders, but embedded in them, and that education is where the terms of authority and belonging are not assumed, but critically examined. So I'm now delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Yessiva Stekubele, a 2015 GRÓ GEST alumnus and current GRÓ GEST PhD scholarship recipient, who will be defending his doctoral thesis in the coming months. He writes on gendered aspects of Ethiopian peacekeeping. His main supervisor is Valur Ingimundarson, professor of contemporary history at the University of Iceland. Sivas, the floor is yours.
Distinguished Permanent Secretary of State, ambassadors, Rector of the University of Iceland, Dean of the School of Humanities, professors, students, GRÓ GEST fellows and alumni, honored guests. It is a great pleasure to join you here in Iceland, which has shown what is possible when a nation commits itself to gender equality, not just as an aspiration, but as a lived reality. Yet we gathered at a moment of profound global uncertainty. Around the world, the principles of equality, dignity, and justice, principles many of us believed were advancing, are under intense pressure. Rather than moving along a predictable trajectory of progress, we have found ourselves navigating a landscape marked by backlash, polarization, and renewed contestation over fundamental rights. Today, I want to speak about three interconnected themes. First, the current global gender equality regime. Second, the gendered dynamics of contemporary conflict and insecurity. And finally, the critical importance of sustained capacity development in strengthening gender equality and women's empowerment. Across the globe, we are witnessing a paradox. On one hand, decades of advocacy, research, policy innovation, and institutional reform have produced undeniable gains. Girls' education has expanded, women's political participation has increased, public discussion about gender-based violence, once considered taboo, is becoming increasingly visible. And global frameworks, including the UN Agenda on Women, Peace and Security, have created hope for shared commitment and principles to advance women's rights. Yet, on the other hand, these gains have been subjected to unprecedented contestation. We are living through what many described as a backlash against gender equality. This backlash is not accidental. It is organized, well-resourced, and increasingly transnational. It manifests in legislative rollbacks on reproductive rights, attacks on gender studies and feminist organizations, and the deliberate framing of gender equality as a threat to national identity and social stability. This regression is unfolding against a backdrop of rising geopolitical tensions, sustained attacks against international institutions, authoritarian tendencies, and the erosion of democracy. At the same time, gender equality initiatives remain chronically underfunded. If retrenchment is a political challenge, underfunding is a structural one. The UN Women's Global Report 2025 underscores that less than 1% of global development assistance goes directly to women's rights organizations. They face short-term funding cycles, budget cuts, expectations to solve deep structural injustice without external support or minimum external support. Underfunding undermines gender equality efforts in three critical ways. It limits the sustainability of feminist organizations, many of which rely on short-term project grants that do not allow for long-term planning and institutional growth. It weakens local ownership as organizations spend more time adopting to gender donor priorities and rather than shaping their own agendas. It also undermines the very network and capacity that are essential for resilience and staying in power, especially in fragile and conflict settings. The combination of political backlash, funding shortages, political instrumentalization of gender issues has created an environment in which progress is neither linear nor guaranteed. It reminds us that achievements can be reversed and that advancing gender equality requires persistence, courage, and a strong vision. Nowhere is the fragility of gender equality more visible than in the context of conflict. The subjects I am closely monitoring, Ethiopia's recent conflict serves as a compelling reminder that gender is not peripheral to patterns of violence and political struggle. Rather, it is integral to the lived experience of individuals and communities, as well as the way hostilities unfold. Conflict in northern Ethiopia, which emerged in 2020, and the subsequent wars across other regions show patterns consistent with conflicts across the world. Women and girls faced widespread sexual violence, displacement, and economic marginalization. Men and boys confronted forced recruitment, migration pressures, psychological burden created by militarized masculinities. Communities experienced profound ruptures, not only through physical violence, but also through the erosion of trust, social cohesion, and the everyday structure that sustains life. From these experiences, two insights emerge that resonate far beyond Ethiopia. First, conflict amplifies pre-existing inequalities. Gender norms that limit women's mobility, decision-making power, and access to resources become even more restrictive during war. Women often shoulder the burden of sustaining households while having little influence over the political and military decisions that shape their life. In Ethiopia, as in many other conflict cases, women's voices were largely absent from formal peace processes. Second, the gender impacts of conflict do not end when the fighting stops. Post-conflict environments are often marked by militarization, trauma, economic collapse, and political uncertainty. These conditions can reinforce patriarchal norms or create new forms of vulnerability. The long-term consequences, such as psychological, economic, and social, will shape gender relations for years to come. The challenge is not only to respond to immediate needs, but also to address the structural drivers of inequality that make societies more vulnerable to conflict in the first place. These insights are not unique to Ethiopia. They echo patterns in Sudan, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and beyond. They remind us that gender equality is inseparable from peace, security, and justice. No peace process is complete. No reconstruction effort is sustainable if it ignores gender harms, gendered power relations, and the voice of those most affected. This brings me to the final theme, the importance of long-term capacity development. Capacity development is often misunderstood as training, but it runs far deeper. It's the building of ecosystems, communities of practice, networks of solidarity, and shared tools and resources that continue beyond individual programs or political cycles. GRÓ GEST stands as a testament to this approach. Over the years, it has invested not only in developing practical skills, but also in fostering confidence, strengthening networks, empowering individuals to operate within a political and institutional arenas shaped by asymmetric power structures. By bringing together experts, practitioners, and scholars from diverse backgrounds, it creates a space for a reflection and collaborative action. Today's event is a very clear reflection of this ongoing commitment. Capacity development is indispensable for strengthening gender equality work in three critical ways. First, it builds leadership grounded in context. Local actors possess an intimate understanding of their societies that external agents often lack. When equipped with appropriate resources, networks, and institutional support, they become powerful catalysts for change. Second, capacity development creates a resilience. In times of crisis, whether it's conflict, political transition, or economic shock, a strong network allows practitioners to mobilize quickly, share information, and support one another. Lastly, it fosters innovation. When people have a space to think and experiment collectively, they develop solutions that can be creative and socially relevant. Capacity development is not a luxury. It is one of the most effective answers we have to backlash, institutional fragility, and the long-term challenges posed by war and conflict. It reinforces the very foundations of gender equality, linking the immediate needs of today with the promise of a more equitable tomorrow. As we look ahead, the question is not whether gender equality is possible. It is whether we are willing to invest in the political, financial, and human foundations that make it possible. We need courage to speak clearly about the forces undermining gender equality, even when it goes against the political trends. We need collaboration to build alliances across actors, regions, disciplines, recognizing that no single actor can address these challenges alone. We need commitment to long-term investment in people, in institutions, and networks that can withstand backlash and fight back. We are not starting from zero. We have decades of evidence, experience, and a global community of practitioners who have dedicated their lives to this struggle. We have programs like GRÓ GEST that demonstrate what thoughtful investment in people can achieve. We have also a new generation of leaders, many of them women, who are reshaping what justice, peace, and equality mean in the 21st century. To sum up, gender equality is a continuous process of negotiation, resistance, and transformation. It demands that we confront power, take on entrenched norms, and imagine alternatives. We do it as a part of a global community. You and I are part of a growing network that refuses to accept inequality as inevitable and refuses to allow injustice to define our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yesivas, for this powerful talk. You captured both the core of today's event and the essence of the GRÓ GEST program. In Yesivas' keynote, we heard how gender equality is both advancing and being contested. That is exactly the landscape in which the GRÓ GEST program works. The program is about long-term impact. It's about strengthening professionals who can advance gender equality even in times of resistance. To show what that looks like in practice, we invited alumni to reflect on how GEST has shaped their work and lives. We received around 50 video messages from former fellows around the world. Not all could be included in this short snapshot, but we are deeply grateful for every contribution, and more will be shared in the coming months. So let us now hear from them. Doesn't work. Oops. Yeah. Oh no.
Okay.
Attending the GEST program in 2023 was an awakening that reshaped my belief and my life. I am Nirmala Maharjan from Nepal, working with Care Nepal as Women and Girls Empowerment and Rights Strategist. Currently, I am pursuing my MPhil in Gender Studies. GEST gave me a voice and the courage to question inequality. It helped me to see how gender, caste, and class shape every woman's story.
Attending the GEST program was the greatest turning point in my career. The skills that I gained in policy advocacy, in gender budgeting, built the muscle in me to enter halls of power, as well as shake and move gender-blind spaces. I have worked with the Parliament of Uganda to review the marriage bill, the assistive technology bill, as well as the gender in education policy, among others.
I think most importantly, what GEST did to my journey was to validate it, not just for myself, but for people around me. I think it renewed my confidence and enthusiasm with which I could work in the field of gender.
Attending GEST program helped me to understand deeply the gender issues and power dynamic that shapes our lives and our communities.
Through the program, I was able to expand my professional network, And immediately after, I was able to secure a grant from Alliance for African Partnerships to implement a relationship violence and sexual misconduct capacity building project together with Michigan State University, MSU, and Makerere University.
What I am doing today to advance gender equality is by creating programs that invest in female farmers and invest in women and recognize the substantial contributions that they bring to coffee cultivation and coffee farming.
Since Iceland, my life has never been the same. Right from learning gender theories from international experts to understanding theory of change, it has really helped me shape flow at work today.
My final project was on a feminist analysis of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement on women informal cross-border traders. These days, I work at Mama Cash supporting activists across the globe. This career move would not have been possible without the skills I learned at the GRÓ GEST Fellowship.
It helped me see how power and narrative shape digital gender justice. The idea that narratives can defeat armies changed how I approach resistance online.
Sharpened and deepened my understanding of intersectional gender issues, and sparked my passion for becoming a gender and energy specialist.
I now work as a senior manager in the Gender Equality, Disability and Social Inclusion practice at Microsafe Consulting in India, where I lead multi-country teams across Asia as well as Africa.
The skills from GEST are a foundation to my work. It provided me with advanced frameworks and confidence to train volunteers on the critical link between gender and climate change.
I work at Nepal Administrative Staff College as a training and research officer. I'm working to draft the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Policy, JC policy, for my organization.
GRÓ GEST nourished my commitment towards feminist movement and to the deep magic of collective care.
GEST really strengthened my leadership and confidence to, integrate gender into migration programming, but also frameworks. And I've led initiatives promoting gender-responsive policies, but also protecting the most vulnerable groups.
Once I returned to Sri Lanka, I had the incredible opportunity of working with amazing women advocates, including a former Supreme Court Justice, as well as a number of amazing not-for-profit organizations. And I was able to contribute to the development of guidelines for victim survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, guidelines for the police to ensure that that reporting process is gender-sensitive, as well as checklists for judges working in cases of sexual and gender-based violence.
My GEST project on women survivors of sexual violence in post-conflict Uganda laid the foundation for my work today, where we influence the enactment of the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls.
Today I feel equipped in handling harassment cases, from being the first responder to adding an intersectional lens in the process of justice. I now lead new community immersive education programs, both in the city and in rural Nepal, while weaving an intersectional lens at every step.
GEST enabled me understand how my gender and disability shape my life experiences as a woman with a disability. The skills I gained enabled me to secure funding to raise awareness of the African Disability Protocol among young women with disabilities across Uganda.
Hello everyone, this is Sarmat from Pakistan. I'm trying and using these tools to train the next generation of Pakistani nurses, doctors and paramedics here.
The GEST program profoundly shaped me as a leader and also a gender profession. I have managed to lead programs such as the Global Spotlight Initiative that has had effective results in the elimination of violence against women and girls in the sub-Saharan Africa.
GEST opened my eyes to new ways of thinking, helping me rethink traditional frameworks and approach development from a more inclusive and critical perspective.
And my GEST project later on became Voice Valor, a survivor-led tool defining online misogyny through lived experiences. With 5,000 plus inputs, it helps detect harms that global norm tools miss and has been recognized for its impact.
The GEST program deeply shaped my analytical lens, and it strengthened and continues to strengthen how I integrate intersectionality, feminist theory, and gender and policy analysis in very practical peace-building strategies.
Based on my network and my exchange in GEST, I was able to put a very strong foot forward into the women participation into the public spaces and policy, and now we run our own fellowship program called Women Building Peace Together.
with the idea to acknowledge the women's contribution in everyday peace-building efforts.
The training that I attained at GEST was such a turning point for me because it equipped me with tools and leadership that enabled me overcome my imposter syndrome. With that confidence, I became the first female executive director for my organization.
I currently work with Women Lift Health, an organization that works with women leaders and developing their leadership capacities across 20 countries in the world. Our work was also recently recognized by the Power Together Award at the Reykjavik Global Forum. 5 years from GEST, I am doing exactly what it prepared me for, turning women's leadership into a driver of equity.
The GEST program has enhanced my skills in research, policy advocacy, project designs, and all these with an intersectional lens on gender, but also in peace building to ensure that gender aspects are integrated in peace building.
So through this policy work, I'm trying to make Nepal's public sector more gender responsive and inclusive. One conversation, one decision, and one training at a time. That's how I carry GIFT spirit moving forward.
Today I work in gender and social inclusion, supporting organizations and private sector institutions to create better environment where diversity and equality are truly lived. I also help women discover their power within and use it to transform their community.
We work with landless women in informal settlement who fight every day for their right to land and housing. Every woman I meet reminds me that equality is not just a goal, it's a living promise.
Thank you, everyone, so much. We're just going to switch over here now from the pulpit to the panel discussion. So, my name is Thomas Borsen-Smith, and I'm the Senior Program Manager at GRÓ GEST. And as incredible as it can be to watch alumni testimonials like this, like one after the other, and see like the kind of long-term impact the GRÓ GEST program has, what's missing from that is how incredibly difficult this is. So a lot of them are sharing the impact, and we are not really hearing so much about like those insane challenges that are behind doing what these people are doing. So in order to tell you a little bit more about the challenges, I would like to invite a panel of GRÓ GEST alumni to the stage. Please come up here. So unfortunately, we just have one microphone, so I'm afraid you're going to have to pass this around. So just really quickly about who's on the stage with us here today. To my left here, we have Telma Kaliu from Malawi. There we go, some supporters in the house. I love it. Alumni from 2019. She's the co-founder of Gen Hub Malawi and works at the intersection of feminist practice, research, policy, and technology. Her work has supported more than 25,000 adolescent girls and strengthened access to justice for hundreds of gender-based violence survivors across Eastern and Southern Africa. Welcome, Telma. And to her left, we have Mohammed Altamash Khan, a GEST alumnus from India, 2022 alumnus. Altamash is a gender trainer and program manager, working extensively with young men and masculinities. In his work, he's reached more than 50,000 young people and collaborated with state governments on gender curricula. His GEST final assignment evolved into a widely used manual on transforming masculinities in India. Welcome, Altamash. And to his left, we have Aarti Lilaram from Pakistan. She's a development practitioner working at the intersection of gender, climate adaptation, and mitigation. She currently leads gender-responsive monitoring and evaluation at the GRÓ Foundation and has trained more than 25,000 women and girls on gender mainstreaming and leadership. Welcome to you. And finally, a man that requires no further introductions is Yeshiwas over here. Give him a hand again. So, where to begin? I think that it would be very prudent to start talking about challenges, like I mentioned before, because, like you mentioned, Yeshi, in your keynote, especially the last couple of years have been incredibly difficult for gender equality. Don't get me wrong; it's always been difficult, but like something has happened in the last year or two that I think we all recognize. So I think I would like to start just asking, what is it that has happened in the last year, and how have you responded to something like this? I think, rather than you putting your hands up, I'll just point out who needs to answer. Thelma, let's start with you. So you work in gender-based violence prevention and response, and I know that you lead an organization that really depends on sustained funding. So can you maybe tell us a bit about how things have changed in the last year and how you've responded to that?
Okay, yeah. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me today. So I think when I left GEST and then going back to the field to work in gender-based violence, we were met with COVID. And the unfortunate part was that there was an increase of gender-based violence cases in Malawi, but we worked towards that. But what is happening currently is something that we have never experienced before. So Malawi, to those of you that don't know, it's in the Eastern and Southern Africa, which is one of the third poorest countries. So which means state funding towards gender-based violence is not a state priority, which is quite unfortunate. We have spent the last 10 years advocating for that, but we have largely dependent on donor funding, of which at this point in time, we have a lot of girls that are suffering from the erosion of gender-based violence that is happening now. So at an organizational level where I lead gender-based violence response at a community level, one thing that we're trying to do, it's not really working, but what we're trying to do is to move from individualistic approaches to respond to gender-based violence. So we used to have something which we used to call Survivor Fund, where we would support a survivor to access services. These are health services or psychosocial support. But currently we're moving from that. We are investing in seed capital for women-led groups that can generate income and still support the survivor so that it's sustainable and prolonged. And we are also making it a key that we need to digitalize and monitor how these funds are being circulated within the community. And we are solely focusing on the communities with feminist-led groups that are within our communities. So this is something that is working, but we're still continuously lobbying for the government to use our taxes to also support social protection. That's what I can say.
Right. So it sounds like this is an ongoing challenge, especially since, let's just say it out loud, like things like USAID, things like that have been like massively scaled back in the last couple of years, which means that you have to like work even harder for the few funds there are. I'm wondering if you could pass the microphone to Altamas, because I want to hear, now this was in gender-based violence prevention, but like you work specifically in educating and engaging young men and boys. Like how does this landscape look where you are?
Yeah, I think just to extend what Thelma just mentioned, I think especially in my work in India, it has been twofold, where on one hand, we have been seeing that there has been that pouring of money, there has been some investment coming in terms of including gender in your work, but the problem has been that it has been more sort of performative. I think the focus has been that you can include it. There has been, gender has been seen as a governance concern, if I may call it, but at the same time, it is just, as I said, just at the level of performance. And at times, you also feel that performance is incentivized. So if you are an organization who are just, you're just working at the superficial level and you're not really challenging the gender norms or the power hierarchy, or you're not really challenging the state order, you're all good. You're all good to go. But the moment you sort of try to expand, you try to go within the layers, there might be some backlash from the state, things like fund cuts, things like whether your ability to get foreign funding gets really sort of impacted. And other thing that has really come forward, especially in context to India, and when I was thinking, I think it's a global concern as well, where things like that, there is also this especially by the political class, to talk about some kind of civilizational revival and this going to the glorious past. And what that has done is, in some ways, try to focus on, and the moment you talk about glorious past, there is this thing about sort of going back to those essentialist ideas of gender, looking at masculinity in terms of strength and protection, and looking at queer and non-normative identities as, not significant to the country's identity. So I think there has been that contradiction in terms of state trying to sort of talk about gender, but at the same time also, bringing these ideas as well, which are...
Exactly. I wanna hold on to what you're talking about here, this sense of, I think every gender practitioner out there will recognize this idea of performativity versus substance, right, when it comes to politics and engagement with gender equality. If you pass the microphone to Arti, because Arti, you work in, I think it is on, yeah, but you work in monitoring and evaluation, which I think if anywhere is like where you have to pick up on whether things are working, whether things are having impact or not. Could you maybe reflect a bit on, or give us a couple of examples of, in your field of work, where do you see like this paradox between substantive gender equality and when it's just sort of like paying lip service to gender equality?
Thank you for the question, Thomas. So I think one of the clearest warning signs is that when gender becomes like a mandatory paragraph in a proposal instead of that meaningful shift in practice. So in terms of monitoring and evaluation, I think those red flags would be when you're focusing a lot on the outputs alone. So like how many people are reached, how many women and girls were beneficiaries in your program, like how many kits were distributed, instead of the outcomes, which are longer sustained over time. And how do you like kind of see those kind of changes over time? Because in those proposal language, which also there are a lot of problematic things in it. So first, like Global North always homogenizes Global South as one category. And a lot of these language does not help, because at the end of the day, when you talk about gender sensitive implementation, it really sort of sees like a disconnect between the language of the proposal and what's sort of needs in the community. I have a really good example from the floods of 2022 in Pakistan. I was involved in one of the flood relief programs there, and as we know through research that women and girls are marginally affected and disproportionately affected through the times in floods and disasters. So a lot of people, there was a lot of global pressure during that time, and donors were reaching out to us left and right because they just wanted to commit money to some or the other project. Mm-hmm. And now the problem is that they wanted to commit in climate adaptation and not mitigation, which is climate adaptation is more short-term and relief-oriented, so not necessarily how to rehabilitate back the communities. And one of the things that happened was they themselves identified menstrual needs in disasters, which is a very important need, but they decided themselves that how they wanted to go about it. So they invested into it, but at the end of it, that when they committed and allocated funds for menstrual products, two things happened. One, that the rural communities in Pakistan, women did not know how to use those sanitary products because they only used cloth. So there was no ecosystem around the engagement and education of using such products. And second thing that happened, that it did not even reach a lot of women because it was given, when the ration and sanitary products are given to male members of the family, because it's a camp situation, it did not even reach the women there. So
right. So here you have like an example of like donors not just being out to tick the box of gender equality, which is clearly what they wanted to do, like throwing all this money into short-term relief, but at the same time they completely, what you could say, completely misunderstood the context in which they were trying to set an agenda in.
While on paper it looks that they achieved,
exactly.
It papers on looks it perfect because you allocated funds for menstrual needs in disasters. You did distribute kits, but at the end of the day, it did not really translate into agency power or access to those things.
Right, and I'd love to pursue you down the road about compliance and reporting and, you know, that whole political landscape. But I think I want to hold on to this idea of global North actors misunderstanding context, because I know, Thelma, this is a pet peeve of yours. So I'm wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I think in the last years we have been in a polycrisis, and I think one of the key things that you have really pointed out is the lack of understanding on the context, which also goes hand in hand with the lack of understanding of the population, the demographic itself, and especially speaking of the majority South. I think we have come to understand that all women and girls in the majority South, be it in Asia, in Africa, or wherever, are vulnerable. But I beg to differ that, especially us as scholars, we need to start questioning the parameters that are only defining us from a single identity that we are vulnerable. I would also want to give an example of the floods as well. I was one of the key people conducting a rapid gender assessment, which is usually done in conflict or in a humanitarian setting. And then this was one of the most devastating floods in Malawi, which communities really took initiative to take something on their own. There was an area that we went to, there was no aid for 2 weeks, but then there was a group of women that managed to gather themselves, created a shelter, and started treating people by the few resources that they had. And then when I wrote this in the report and then presented it to the authorities, they said this is not eligible. Which organization enabled them to do that? So it's like we're always viewed that we are waiting for a savior to come, which is in most of the case, it's like the legitimate white savior or a legitimate Red Cross, Medicine Sans Frontières, and all these organizations, but we are equally capable. So the danger of a single side story, as Chimamanda has said, these identities, we need to start denying them. It's not that we want to deny that we're vulnerable, no, but we have to move beyond the dichotomy of there's a donor and there's a recipient, or there is a vulnerable person or a resilient person. We are equally capable, and we need to move around the temporal spaces that we can also equally occupy and move beyond the agency that is defined in the West, but rather occupy the agencies that we already have and we can also teach the West.
Exactly. And applause, by the way. Thank you. And no, but I think Thelma and everyone in here that those power dynamics between global North donors, global South recipients, like that kind of binary, it's like it's something that's both awkward and uncomfortable to talk about, I think. And I think it is important that we allow ourselves sometimes to sit in that kind of discomfort and actually have the conversation. I want to hold on to that, the idea of this power dynamic, because yes, you're in research. So, and I know that especially in global research, there is like a lot of, in terms of power dynamics, there's a lot of ideas about whose research is considered legitimate, right, or not. Do you understand where I'm going? Definitely. I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
When it comes to research, there is this kind of a divided kind of the global north as a center of knowledge and knowledge production, and the global south as a site of or object of study. Which also implicates how the experts and the researchers are positioned in that kind of knowledge production system, and often the global knowledge scholars have they have more or better access to funding, right. And at the same time they are also presented as international and global experts, while researchers and experts from the global south are often framed and represented as kind of local experts or regional experts, which somehow, to some extent, it's important so that when it comes to our local context, sometimes if you are from the external and Western institutions, somehow your ideas and arguments might be seen in a very negative way. Your arguments might be seen as something externally influenced and kind of external kind of imposition on the state and the political system. But in terms of a general knowledge production, that's a major kind of challenge when it comes to research. And the program like GRÓ GEST, for example, could be kind of, a way to kind of address that kind of power asymmetry. Personally, I'm from the Global South, but spent almost much of my PhD research here. So I'm kind of playing that kind of dual identity and getting the resource and the space, from the Global North, but also representing the Global South. So that's why actually I like about GEST in terms of kind of addressing that kind of power asymmetry.
Sure. Yeah. But I'm wondering, how do you negotiate that differential, if I may ask?
Well, if you talk about negotiation, I would prefer to reflect from two kind of dimensions. Negotiation between expertise, between the Global North and Global South expertise, and negotiation within the Global South itself. And maybe the second one might be somehow kind of related to my experience. When I go to field work, when I did my fieldwork research, I had to negotiate to get access to the field data. Yeah. Sometimes I have to kind of remove some of my questions, or sometimes I have to remove some of my terminologies. For example, it's very difficult to use the term feminism when you go to research, because it has some kind of, externally imposed kind of terminology. That does not necessarily mean compromising my findings and analysis, but it's a way of it's a strategic kind of communication, so that your findings can be communicated in a way the state officials can kind of understand or accept to some extent.
Right. So, sure.
To that negotiation, especially within our context. And I think everybody sitting here working within the field would agree that negotiation is not just one of incidental, but rather it's very central to the work that we do, right? And in terms of those negotiation would look like what, as you rightly said, what gets included, what gets maybe softened, what gets omitted at times, right? Because maybe an example, if I may add, I was working with one of the state government wherein I was trying to develop a curriculum for gender and masculinity for year 9 to 12. And they sort of invited me and they said, okay, you've got these many days, you have to write and submit it. And I wrote and submitted it. And 3 days into it, I get a call from the principal secretary saying that you have used words like sex, sexuality, patriarchy. You can't be using those, right? So now, in terms of my own understanding, my feminist scholarship sort of taught me that this was a way of censorship, and the words in itself hold power, right? So I have to use those words, those terminologies, because it can also be a way of sort of some kind of erasure, right? You don't use patriarchy, you say that patriarchy does not exist. So it was in that moment a negotiation, whether do I give up this opportunity of sort of, do I discard this whole project, or do I change the language, or do I sort of then maybe work collaboratively with some agents and try to sort of relook at some of the words? And that's what I did, right? So negotiation at that point meant that I collaborated with the local teachers who were eventually going to teach that curriculum and said that, okay, instead of patriarchy, can we sort of explain it like maybe in terms of power, in terms of how land is owned or how land gets transferred? So it's not using the word, but at the same time sort of making sure that that conversation persists.
Right. So in that sense, like the idea of negotiating, I feel like that is such it's such a central part of the work we do. Like, because nothing is ever accepted at face value when you're in gender equality. Whenever you bring up, when you state an obvious fact, it's almost always contested, and you have to negotiate how much, a certain intervention has a right to be intervened, right? But I'm wondering, Arti, like if you could speak a little bit to, because again, in monitoring evaluation where you work, I'm imagining that this idea of like negotiating and finding space for like how much gender and gender equality can take up is an issue.
For sure.
Okay.
To say the least. I think it's twofold. So one is that the constant struggle is to negotiate with international donors and to understand that monitoring is important, but evaluation and learning, because now they're calling it MEL, so learning from the past and the present and then looking at future. So the struggle is to constantly encourage and push that it's not only the day-to-day monitoring of indicators that have been set in project and design and implementation is important, but the evaluation of it, which is not linear, it does not happen overnight, it takes a long time. The behavioral change and attitude shifts, they take a while to change, show, disrupt, all of those things. So it's important, and it's constantly just negotiating that with them, that it's important to invest in evaluation, because the budget cuts when they don't, and evaluation is expensive as well, because when impact measurements happen for a study over time, it requires funding.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is no funding kept in the beginning of the project, it's hard to then look at it. And the second is, in my organization, I'm not quite young anymore, but in terms of the senior leadership and people who are making the decisions at the end of project cycles, it's hard, to say the least, to bring them all on one table, because it's important to look that the project aim should be one, but somehow the priorities along the way have to be kind of talked about day in, day out, sit at the table, making sure they're not talking over each other, making sure those voices in those spaces are also heard, because the communities are sitting, the leadership who's giving out the money, they are sitting, then we as foundation people are sitting who is negotiating. So it feels like Sarah Ahmed rightly said that it's a killjoy moment for us, right, where I have to be that person and say that, okay, it has to be beyond outputs. Outcomes need to be looked at.
Right. So not, I really sense that having to negotiate gender equality is really central to everyone's work here. So, but I'm afraid also we're running out of time. So Thelma, here towards the end, super quickly in under 30 seconds. Do you find you have to negotiate a lot?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think I would want to reflect to what I learned from Giti. I never forget this on redefining the problem. I think this is one thing that is really working in my renegotiating in most of the spaces, because most of the times when you're writing proposals, it's always the problem is child marriages. A lot of young girls are getting married because of child marriages. The culture in Malawi is bad, but I think I've found a way in just negotiating within the state actors, within the traditional leaders, and then also within the service providers. And the negotiation is not going to them to say the problem is we have child marriage, is what do you think? So recreating, co-designing spaces and recreating the spaces that go beyond just accepting a definition of the problem that you have been given is actually the good starting point. And beyond baseline and endline, beyond always writing reports against the indicators, we need to do feasibility studies that we can both co-create and co-end the projects that we're working on.
All right, thank you. So we're going to stop here. I could continue this all day, but we are on a schedule. So I think thank you so much to the panel. Big round of applause. At this point, I would like to ask the Director General of GRÓ, Nina Björk Jónsdóttir, to come up here for a few words.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists for your excellent presentation. I will be very brief, or I'll try to be at least. GRÓ, the center has 4 training programs, and there are 1,900 fellows that have come to Iceland to train at the 4 programs. There are 117 that have finished a master, 28 that have finished a PhD. But the aim of the event series that we now have is to go beyond these numbers. We want to know, where are the alumni? What are they doing? How are they using their training for the benefits of their societies? And we started in November with a geothermal training program, where we heard how the program has for over 40 years been helping or supporting Kenya in their work of becoming number 6 in the world when it comes to geothermal energy and installed capacity. In last month, we heard from the Fisheries Training Program, these are just some of the stories, how around Lake Victoria, people are working together, trained by the program to manage the fisheries in a sustainable manner. And today we have heard of the excellent work that the Gender Equality Studies and Training Program alumni are doing all around the world. I want to also join everyone, the Rector and the Permanent Secretary, in thanking everyone who has contributed to this program over the years. Of course, the Rector of the University, thank you, the University of Iceland, thank you, Irma Erlingsdottir, for your excellent passion for this project and leadership during this time. All the dedicated staff of the program, thank you all so much. There's lots of information on the GRÓ website, but I will not keep you any longer as we have run a little bit over time. But we will end this session looking at the present and the future of the program. So there will be, and I'm told this will be very short. So there are 4 GRÓ GEST alumni, or not alumni, fellows that are currently in the program. So Priyan Shah Jain from India, Nga Nora alumni from Cameroon, Godfrey Junior Madongo from Malawi, and San Ya Giri from Nepal. So we will leave this event listening to the future alumni, and I invite you to stay for refreshments in the hall where we can continue this discussion. But thank you everyone for today.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to our wonderful faculty, we have this opportunity to bring today's extremely thought-provoking event to a close. As the current batch of GRÓ GEST Fellows, we find ourselves at the center of learning, creating, and also adapting. Because every day we are navigating or negotiating with a geopolitical landscape that shifts beneath our feet. We are here today to reassure you that in spite of these shifts, a happily ever after ending, it is possible. So how do we get there? First, let's start simply by acknowledging that, yes, it's incredibly difficult to be hopeful right now. But the more difficult it is, the more critical it is to hold on to that hope, especially for people in this room who are privileged enough to have means and opportunities to keep going, to persist. Audre Lorde said that revolution is not a one-day event. So let's just keep going.
And as we keep going, we look towards the theme of the upcoming International Women's Day on March 8th, which says Give to Gain. The vision of the 2026 cohort is completely aligned to this theme. We are committed to giving this movement our commitment, our resilience, and our sacrifices. All of us here present are contributing in different ways through research, funding opportunities, mentorship, and shared spaces where marginalized voices can take center stage. We are rest assured that when we invest in these voices, the entire development system is developed for the better, and we all stand to gain. We are sure that by giving openly, we will one day gain gender equality in our communities, in our countries, and even globally.
In these same beliefs, we are not different from those who have come before us, those who have inspired us, those we've learned from their projects, from their research, from their engagements with the different governments, international organizations, and communities, most of which we've witnessed on the stage here and from the video that we saw here. And as current GRÓ GEST Fellows, the newfound knowledge that we have now that we're learning is going to be translated into actionable impact back home on the ground in the communities that we work with. From Malawi, where I come from, to Sri Lanka, to Uganda, to Ghana, and many other countries, GRÓ GEST Fellows have contributed positively to the gender equality movement, and we plan on doing the same. We do not stop here. We join in the resistance and we ensure that we contribute to this movement towards positive gender equality outcomes. And as such, we cannot let all of these efforts go to waste.
These past efforts and our perseverance in the present will define our future. To quote the radical feminist writer Arundhati Roy, another world is not just possible, she's on her way. Maybe many of us won't be here to greet her, but on a quiet day, when I listen very carefully, I can hear her breathing. And so, let us rise. Let the mere act of holding hope be our resistance to the pressures we face. No matter how hard the journey already is and how bleak the future may look, let us rise to create a better place for all. Let us rise, knowing that we are all in this together. We are all in this together. Thank you.